Over 20 years ago, my father had an accident on his BMW R100RS. Though he was safe and well, the bike was only just short of being a write-off. And despite his attempts to repair the bike, interest faded and 20 years passed by in a cold, damp garage. Now in his 80s, it was unlikely my father was ever going to repair the bike. Which is where I come in. A quick trip cross-country to North Wales to collect the bike. Not the best of journeys, especially when you're in a van, but it's all made worthwhile once you see the views of Wales. The unspoilt horizon across the Irish Sea is a sight for sore eyes. But I'm here to collect my dad's bike, not to look at the beautiful views. Despite his best attempts to protect the bikes, this damp old garage has taken its toll on the old BMW over the last 20 years. I'm not a mechanic, and I've never restored a motorbike before, so I had no idea where to start a project like this. The Kawasaki being a project for my brother's retirement. I'd start by loading both bikes onto the van, dropping the Kawasaki off at my brother's on the way and leaving my dad with space in the garage to work on the Honda DeVille. Head back from Colwyn Bay to sunny St Ives and start making room in my single garage for the new addition to the family. So joining the Versys will be a BMW R100RS. Even after the accident, the engine was running pretty smoothly, so it's mostly a clean-up job, I hope. The front forks were bent, so they're going to need replacing, but as the engine, gearbox and drive shaft have never been drained of oil, I'm hoping there's not much to do in that area. All the parts were there in one condition or another, so it was just a case of what needed cleaning up, what could be reused, and what I had to replace. Things such as the airbox, it was in good nick and just needed cleaning up. My dad had even bought some new parts, like gaskets, and thankfully the brakes just needed an overhaul. Parts of the fairing were damaged, and my dad had bought some extra bits from eBay. The seat had seen better days and needed rust proofing, and a respray. Some parts of the fiberglass fairing were also going to need a lot of attention. Having a friend in the aerospace industry was really handy. He loaned me an endoscope so I could look into the engine and see if there was any damage. Generally it looked okay, but there were certainly some parts that were going to need to be stripped down and cleaned. On stripping the engine down, I could see everything in oil was still well protected, but if it was dry, there was some work to do. Oh boy. Most of the engine was pretty good. Some bits were coked up and needed a clean. As a beginner, I made use of loads of online resources. There's an abundance of boxer engine websites and YouTube videos, with schematics for specialist tools, like this one to remove the pushrod tubes, and again, my friend in the aerospace industry had one of these made for me. Out with the old aluminium, in with the new stainless steel. And a little bit of coking can't compete with a Dremel. Polished up quite nice. So now it's time to look at the heavier stuff. The inside of this heavy lump had fared quite well as it was covered in oil, but I was going to have to strip the clutch down, and while I was there, give it a new friction plate. The outer block could just be cleaned down. Some parts were beyond repair, but I wanted to salvage as much as I possibly could, and an overnight bath in this stuff works wonders. A good scrub down and a little bit of elbow grease, and the main block started to come up quite nicely. So it was quite a thing to get to the point where I was starting to put things back together. Looking good. With the engine out, time had come to strip the frame down and unpack it ready to go to the powder coaters. It wasn't looking happy, so I was really interested to see how it would turn out. And I wasn't disappointed. The finish was beautiful. And yet another phase of putting things back together. New front forks in, and time for another specialist tool. The stock tools just weren't up to the job. Time to grind some notches into an old socket. And if I do say so myself, it worked brilliantly. One engine nearly in. I hummed and hawed about getting this powder coated, but the cost and the hassle of stripping it right down to the bare bones beat me. Instead, I stripped it down to bare metal and treated it with aluminium paint, finishing it in black, of course. Once again, scanning the internet to see how to test some of the electrics, I found that all the electrics were working. Some, however, were looking a bit old and tired, so I decided to upgrade. Motorworks do a 600 watt conversion kit, allowing charging to start at only 2000 RPM, reaching maximum charging at 4000 RPM. I also replaced the ignition trigger unit with a fully electronic one. But now we get to 6 months of hell, because my BMW doesn't completely match any wiring diagram. It has a factory fitted hazard warning light switch, only included in supplementary diagrams, which include different colour wires to those on the bike. Having spent so much on the electrics, I wanted to keep the costs down, so in order to get the bike on the road looking reasonably good, I decided to do the paintwork myself. The idea being that at some stage later I could get it professionally done. But for the time being, rattle can will do. And I was really pleased with the results. They didn't look too bad. Other parts were easy, they just needed stripping down and coating in black paint. The gear and the brake levers were cleaned down, treated with aluminium paint, and then again a little bit of hammerite. I didn't have a clue what I was doing with these, even after buying the book from Motorworks. So, I want to thank Brooks Airhead Garage on YouTube, where he not only strips down and rebuilds the carbs, but explains in layman terms what every part does. As well as video recording the progress of the bike, I kept a running track of everything I spent, and the restoration wasn't cheap. Remember, the bike I got for free. So when you look at some of the bikes currently on the market, and I don't know what condition these are in, there's still room for a small profit if you don't put a value on your time. Now I've got most of the bike back together, I wanted to see what it was going to look like in daylight. Obviously not complete without the tank, but I was quite chuffed with the way it looked. With the important things hooked up, it was time for the moment of truth. Now the bike was running, it was time to dot the T's and cross the I's. The original rear suspension springs were back from the powder coaters. I just hope the shocks themselves have stood the test of time. Mark, my friend in the aerospace business, bead blasted the alloys for me. A little bit of primer, some silver enamel, lots and lots of lacquer, and bake for 40 minutes. And I know I've said this a few times before, though I say so myself, they look pretty good. Time for a test run. Turn the fuel on, idiot. What a moment, the first time I've ever sat on this bike. I've only ever ridden modern bikes, and this felt low and small. The handlebars were extremely narrow, and the steering felt really heavy. So there were mixed emotions. Here I was, riding my dad's pride and joy, and the bike I'd restored to life. But I wasn't sure if I liked it. A few test runs and some tuning later, all that's required is a bit of running in. I'm pleased to say it's starting to grow on me. It may not be as refined as a modern bike, but it has character. I know every inch of it. It's a 300,000 mile engine with only 70,000 on the clock. It has a reliable pedigree and I'm falling in love. 3 years and £3,500 later. It's classically accurate with a few mod cons. In the next video I hope to show you the BM's 2019 Summer Adventure. Thanks for watching and ride safe.